A red light disappeared. Now it's back! It means we can start. Sorry, guys, we're a few minutes late because Kurt Schlichter had to get out of a nice little dress he was wearing and identify as a man for the next hour. No, seriously, I'm Sebastian Gorka. This is America First with a very, very special, no commercial breaks. Just get to the meat of the issue with two of the people I respect the most. When we want to talk military, when we want to talk national security, we get these two great Americans on the line with us. And today, they're coming on together. It's Colonel K. Kurt Schlichter. You know him. He is the author of the 5 superb Kelly Turnbull books. He's a 27-year veteran of the U.S. Army. He is also Town Hall senior contributor with a blistering piece landing there tomorrow. We also have with us Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Jane Duff, former... what is the title? You are Veterans for Trump. Is it chair or co-chair?
I was the co-chair for Veterans for Trump and the advisory board for Women for Trump. Retired United States Marine.
And now Newsmax contributor. And the perfect guest to discuss what is going on with the U.S. military today. I'll save the cuts till later. I got you both on deck. God bless you for joining us today. For those who are tuning in because they don't listen to the daily radio show and they just got this feed popped up on their favorites on YouTube, let's start with a little bit who you are, your military experience, your MOS, your military experience. Let's start ladies first. Jessie Jane Duff, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you did in uniform.
Okay, I retired from the United States Marine Corps after 20 years of active duty, the rank of gunnery sergeant, and I was a tractor-trailer operator. I hauled for the infantry and the wing units, and mind you, as you get promoted into the staff non-commissioned officer ranks, such as staff sergeant and gunnery sergeant, etc., you don't get to drive the trucks anymore, but it was really exciting for me to support the infantry and the wing units and do the field times and operations. Spent some time in 29 Palms. I spent it overseas in Okinawa, Japan, supported a wide range of units, moved 9 times in 20 years. That's who I am.
God bless. Colonel K. Kurt Schlichter, tell us about what you did and also a rather interesting duty you had out in the West Coast.
Well, Dr. Gorka, I enlisted as a private first class, went to basic training at Fort Sill, immediately went on to officer candidate school. That was a living hell. They decided to put me in what was called the Chemical Corps, which was heavy on math. So I ended up doing that for about 3 years of active duty, including running a heavily armed car wash in Desert Storm.
He means a decontamination facility for those of you not in the know.
It was a mobile decontamination unit. We had the only thing that made me feel better is we had more machine guns per capita per soldiers than any other unit in the Army. After that, I got out. I went to law school, but I decided I wanted to see if I still liked the military. And I joined the California Army National Guard, and my second or third drill was the Los Angeles riots. And I spent the remainder of my career with the Cal Guard. I deployed to Kosovo in 2004 to 2006 with the Cal Guard and other forces. And I commanded forces in northern San Diego, 2 battalions worth during the San Diego fire crisis in 2007. I ended up as a battalion commander for a cavalry squadron and then a deputy commander of a brigade of 5,000 folks. I did a national training center rotation with them, and I did lots of time overseas, stationed in Germany, spent a lot of time in Ukraine, went to the Far East. It was a good time. And graduate of the Army War College, which is a party war college, as we like to point out.
As the National War College, where I taught as well when I was posted to National Defense University, the motto of the highest JPME, Joint Professional Military Education College, was, "It's only a lot of reading. if you do it. And that's what they shared with us as students, as 05s and 06s. Okay, we're going to have a lot of fun, but we have to talk about the serious issues. Let's work backwards in time chronologically. Let's talk with the latest dust up over the last few days, based upon 2 nights in a row of reporting from my former colleague at Fox, Tucker Carlson, who is, I think, right now the host of the most popular show out there. I think it's maybe between 4 and 5 million viewers on news right now. Those figures, don't quote me, were from at least 6 months ago, but it's a popular show and he's doing a lot of good work. And he did a monologue followed up by the next day on the state of the U.S. military, and especially the speech that Biden gave, where he had 2 women stood behind him as props, who he was promoting, and the fact that he talked about in his speech the amazing things the military are doing when it comes to maternity flight suits and new hairstyles for the women in our armed forces. As a result of that, he was attacked, lambasted in social media across various platforms by members of the U.S. military. Let's start with somebody from Space Command, the newest force created by Donald Trump, the 45th president, and the most senior enlisted member of that command, who in uniform on the official account said the following. Play cuts.
Drama TV. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what I call it. I'll apologize up front and tell you that I don't have cable news at home. I don't have it here in the office, and I don't watch a lot of drama TV. I understand some comments were made yesterday, and I watched the clip that Mr. Carlson produced as he referred to pregnant women in the military. I'll remind everyone that his opinion, which he has a right to, is based off of actually 0 days of service in the armed forces.
All right, he is wearing digital camouflage Marine Corps issue combat. So let's start with you, Gunny Duff. Your response to a Marine doing that on an official account with reference to a journalist.
Disgusting. Kurt can tell you, I came out after him probably first, after a long list of senior leaders that I went after. First of all, he was wrong. You do not go on national television to state your opinion using an official military account. We have rules and regulations that ensure that that's not supposed to happen. We do not have a military that attacks civilians. I mean, this is not far from what we have seen in countries where the military rules the nations. So we don't do that, number one. Number two, he admits he doesn't even have cable television. So I would point blame at the Defense Department itself that under the leadership of Secretary Lloyd Austin, mind you, he's only been in office 6 to 8 weeks so far, but Jonathan Kirby coming out, a former admiral, making his attacks against was basically green lighting this for everybody to go and proceed. But a Marine should know better.
Let me break that down because we lost you there for a second. So having a former admiral, now the spokesman for the Department of Defense, come out swinging against Tucker Carlson, the journalist, was taken as a green light for these kinds of additional attacks.
It might. Absolutely. But I would go back now and talk about being a Marine. The Marine should have known better. And not only did I feel that he was disgusting to come out admitting that he doesn't even watch the show, doesn't understand the context of it. He was already prejudiced by Admiral Kirby's statement. So he wasn't even able to go in with a clear mind himself. I was watching the show live, and I thought Tucker Carlson hit it right on point. He was basically stating, if anybody hadn't seen it by now, that we are forgetting to talk about our enemies and our priorities by the Commander-in-Chief's own words were these reasons that women should be able to have longer careers. New hairstyles was his exact quote. Talking about maternity flight suit uniforms, talking about transgender surgeries. I personally, if I was in that behind him getting promoted, I would have been aghast. I wouldn't have known what to say at the time.
Because you're about to get an additional star, and you're supposed to be recognized for your service and where you're going, and your commander-in-chief is talking about hairstyles. Isn't that insulting?
Exactly. It was insulting, and it gives the impression that women are more of a burden to the military than they are an asset. He should have been talking about their qualifications, their exceptional military experience, and the combatant commands, apparently, that they were going to be going to. This was an ideal opportunity to celebrate. If he wanted to celebrate diversity, he still could have done it in an exceptional way. He proceeded to go on and forget the name of his own Secretary of Defense and that unit over there, or whatever he called it, the Pentagon. He couldn't even remember the name of the Pentagon. So it was embarrassing. And what Tucker Carlson focused on was meanwhile, China is building up the world's largest navy and focused in on what our enemies are doing and what our enemies are projecting to the world versus the commander-in-chief of the United States military. That was a clear contrast that anybody with a brain could have seen. But I go back to this Master Gunnery Sergeant. Kurt will tell you it was rather humorous. My first attack on him was, you have no right to be doing this. The second one was, are you overweight, or does the camera add 20 pounds? I literally said that to him, and you know what that knucklehead did? As one of our close friends, Kurt and my close friends, responded with, he responded with a bunch of Tinder photos toward me. He had created this collage of photos.
Hang on. Master Gunnery Sergeant Stalker sent you or posted his Tinder photographs?
Okay, I'm using that loosely as a metaphor. He created a collage.
What, just posing photographs?
A collage of photos of him in the gym. And I almost lost my cookies right there. I thought, and clearly these were dated photos because he's apparently based in Colorado, and somebody recognized the gym and they said there's no way these are current photos because one, he would have had a mask on and the other people would have had a mask on. And one of the colonels we follow on Twitter shot back, basically like, guy, we all looked better when we were younger. You now are older by the resemblance of your gray hair and a little pudgier. None of us should be posting photos like this. I was aghast. A Master Gunnery Sergeant decided to go at me with photos of him in the gym pressing weights.
Clearly.
He wasn't disturbed. And he wasn't disturbed over the comments that he was making on his official military account. And he failed to address even the issue of going after a citizen journalist. So
clearly, Master Gunny Stalker has no idea who Jesse Jane Duff is. Before he is tempted, before Colonel K posts his pumping iron photographs on his Twitter feed. Look, we heard. He said it in the video. Tucker Carlson has got this much military service, 0. Well, look, I served in the British Army Reserve. So does that mean I can only talk about the British Army? Let's talk with somebody who's had 27 years of experience. Your comments on the whole phenomena, especially Master Gunnery Sergeant Stalker.
Well, I don't even know where to start, Dr. Gorka. There is so much to unpack here, from the big picture of the destruction of 240 years of civil-military separation to the fact that this guy, who used to be in Cyber Command, is so inept and doesn't understand the battle space well enough that he thinks he can compete on social media by posting his pictures of, old workouts. And of course, he was subjected to unbelievable mockery and memeing. But I mean, this is it's funny, but it's also scary because let's face the ugly fact: our military has won as many wars in the last 20 years as Tucker Carlson has. It has also lost more wars. So maybe we need to lose some of this attitude. And I saw it on a lot of these guys. There were a lot of generals, a lot of colonels, a lot of command information accounts posting this nonsense because, the memo doesn't have to go out, Dr. Gorka. Everybody knows that this is okay. And in fact, it is okay because none of them have been punished. There have been, I think, one account walked it back, kind of, but there's been, what there should have been is, I'm sorry, Master Sergeant Stalker has been relieved of his duties. I've lost confidence in him. He doesn't understand the proper role of the military in public discourse. But none of that has happened. So they all knew what was going on. But they all put out this same kind of weird propaganda about, we're the most lethal fighting force in history. And, victory starts here, says one general. Now, I was in Desert Storm at 7 Corps headquarters with my mobile car wash at the height of American military power during the 100 hours of the ground war in Desert Storm. It has been all downhill since, starting with the alleged peace dividend and going on through the poorly planned, poorly executed wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I add we are still fighting and still losing people in. We lost a contractor just recently in Iraq. The military has been gliding on the legacy of Desert Storm, which itself was built from the rebuilding of the military after Vietnam by a bunch of visionary officers and senior NCOs. And we require another of those, but they've been gliding off that for years, and we keep telling ourselves, we're the best, and all the time we're crashing destroyers into cargo ships in the Western Pacific. We are unable to deploy large formations. We are unable to win when we do. I asked that general, when does this victory that starts here, when does it start? Because I've been waiting 2 decades for it. This is a serious problem. Like many other cultural institutions in America, the military is running off the legacy of its predecessors. This is an inherited military. And yes, in Gallup polls, the American people say it is the most respected organization out there, which makes these guys fat and lazy, figuratively at least, despite their pictures. And they are still gliding off this legacy, and they're speaking as if this, that Chester Nimitz is sailing around in the Western Pacific instead of ill-trained destroyer crews. They're smashing into other boats.
All right,
it's scary, and it's going to fight us.
Let me just update this, because we are broadcasting this live. My superb producer's 4 offices down listening to the show because he lives and breathes this stuff. And he's just sent me the latest. So this is from the Daily Caller. I'm just going to read this live on air. The U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, has said Wednesday, today, that the Department of Defense will prioritize lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex people in its decision-making processes.
So he's learned nothing. So he's learned nothing from the last 2 days in which the American people and many veterans are offended by the very statements in which they were attacking Tucker Carlson. He's learned nothing. And let's address Secretary Austin then. He's the most politicized Secretary of Defense we've probably ever seen. Yeah. The last 2 Secretary of Defenses were also board members at Raytheon. It was reported by Business Insider that Secretary Austin has $1.7 million in stock in the company. And I dare to say the last number, I think, was over $3 million, maybe it was higher, of contracts awarded to Raytheon within the first 30 days of him sitting in that seat. Doesn't mean he influenced those awards, but the perception is really bad that this man is potentially profiting off of war. And how can you put the good order and discipline and the troops' welfare in front when you know it's lining your pockets?
I'm just going to read this again, Kurt. It's your turn now. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has said the DoD will prioritize, and this is prioritizing in its decision-making processes, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex people, whatever that is, intersex people. I'm just going to ask the stupid question. With 7 years teaching in the JPME, that's me, teaching our officers, teaching our senior enlisted, what the hell has where you put your penis got to do with crushing our enemies, Kurt?
Well, Dr. Gorka, you have a faulty premise. You think the enemies of the establishment are the Chinese or the Iranians or the North Koreans. They're not. They're normal Americans who resist this nonsense. And when you understand that this is a cultural war, then it all makes some sort of sense. Now, a lot of people are going to die because of this nonsense, I'm afraid. I hope that doesn't happen. But an unserious military going up against a very serious one, that's bad.
All right, let me tell you my story, and you both get to react. So when I came here, I moved here as a foreigner. My wife was American, and I was blessed to be offered a position to teach at National Defense University, the highest joint training post-grad facility for our U.S. military. And I moved here. And in 2008, I started teaching as an assistant professor at Fort McNair in D.C. My specialty had been counterterrorism. I'd worked in a military intelligence unit in the British Reserves, and my thing after 9/11, I worked for an amazing Marine, Colonel Nick Pratt, in a DoD Solik-funded program out of Germany to train our military and our allies on understanding groups like Al-Qaeda. And I landed here, and I thought, let me look at the syllabi of the JPME system. Let me look at what is available to our officers to study at places like Carlisle, the War College for the Army, Quantico, the Marine Corps University, and where I was, National Defense University. And I found lots of courses on, rightly so, on Thucydides, the Peloponnesian Wars. I mean, you could probably dam the Potomac with courses on ancient Greek history. Not good ones, but courses. Then a couple on Vietnam, a little bit, here's a sexy book and we'll read it for 10 weeks. And then a couple on Bosnia and the Balkans. And remember, this is 2008, and we're talking about a war in 94. And then I found a massive lacunae. I found a huge hole. Nothing on what I'm interested in back then, which is jihadi ideology. I wrote the first course at National Defense University, 7 years after 9/11, on global jihadism. Nothing, and I mean zip, on Persian strategy, on how Iranians think about war. Nothing on China or Asiatic conceptualization of war. A little bit of a hat tip to Sun Tzu on various syllabi, but nothing on the PLA's, the People's Liberation Army concept of war. Nothing on unrestricted warfare. Nothing on One Belt, One Road. This is how we get to the position where whether you are intersex will prioritize you in the decision-making of the United States military, allegedly, putatively, the most powerful military in the world. And that's a long preamble to the following. I've had a long association with Bragg. I've been my company, before I joined the administration, had a contract working for C.G. Cleveland, for the commanding general of USASOC, U.S. Army Special Operations Command. And I've been a guest lecturer at the Kennedy School, the qualification school for the Green Berets, for years and years. I'm still teaching for them. One time I went down to the Commanders in Extremis unit at Bragg. You know who these guys are. These are the guys who, within 72 hours, if they get the order, they have to be in the sandbox, or they have to be, 5,000 miles away killing bad guys. And I was asked to come in and do the ideology of ISIS. I gave my brief. 70 cadre and junior officers. First question after my brief. And this is seared into my mind, guys. Young officer has the balls in front of his seniors to stand up and say, "Thank you, Dr. Gorka, for explaining why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I'm just about to do my 4th rotation in theater, and no one has told me why I'm really going. I've made the decision because I've got a wife and kids, but nobody has given me strategic clarity on why I'm going. Kurt, transgenderism is now our strategic clarity. Unload."
Well, I mean, what you and I laughed about before, we were when I was in War College, I was being told that the weather was our greatest strategic threat, and not even like tomorrow. I mean, like in 100 years. So this was a disaster on every single level. I just wonder if we're going to have to add a 6th paragraph to the op order. LGBTQ $, lira symbol, euro symbol, XYZ prioritization. I mean, it's ridiculous when you come from the premise of war fighting, when you come from the premise of a serious military that wants to deter or defeat the enemy, when you come to it from the perspective of an that wants to wage a cultural war to suppress normal Americans, then it's completely understandable. The military was the last institution. The military leadership has fallen. Now, there is good news there. Because it's a hierarchical organization, because soldiers do what commanders check, wokeism can move very quickly through it. As soon as you're checking wokeism, you're going to get a lot of wokeism. You can also change it back when you have leadership at the top that is not intimidated by the brass and that is focused on rebuilding. And very quickly, once it is firmly established that the commander is going to check warfighting capability, you're going to have warfighting capability. So it's not beyond saving, but I think it is beyond saving until we get a conservative president.
Jessie Jane, you have a unique perspective because you have not just 20 years, but you had one of the coolest ranks, not just in the Marine Corps, but in the U.S. military, gunnery sergeant. Let's talk about, as a woman who did that, who achieved that, with all the inherent challenges that represents, the role of lesbianism and intersex in the future of the U.S. military. Just your raw reaction.
Okay.
Sorry,
I'm going to speak as a Marine. I'm going to speak as a Marine because that's the easiest way for me to speak. That this is utterly offensive to what the tip of the spear means to the rest of the world. I mean, the Marine Corps is the tip of the spear. We can be anywhere in the world within 48 hours. And when we are focused on sexuality, whether it be male, female issues, physical fitness tests, we've lost our focus. It was very simple when I was on active duty. The men were given a standard that they had to attain because you cannot compare a female or a male soldier or Marine to the same standard. And I used to always hear these Marines get so mad that the females did not have to do the pull-ups like they did for the physical fitness test. And I would say to them unequivocally, the physical fitness test, I'm not talking about combat readiness test, I'm talking about the physical fitness test, is not a grade of equality. It is a grade of fitness. I want to know that the 20-year-old female and the 20-year-old male are reaching the highest capable standard that their body is capable of. It was a realistic goal for both. Now they are finding that when they do these combat style tests that the Army has implemented, 64% of the women are failing because they've decided to create the exact same test for both. So you're going to essentially lower a standard for men and raise it for women. What are you getting? You're getting weaker men and you're burning out women that could have actually performed in a job perfectly fine. But because of the Obama administration lifting the combat exemption for women, and let me be clear to this about people who are listening who don't understand what this means. I'm not talking about pilots. I'm not talking about people that deployed and supported in the supporting roles. I'm talking about infantry, hand-to-hand combat, ground combat. That means women can now go face an ISIS fighter like we have done all throughout the Middle East and go into hand-to-hand combat. And if you look at what the soldiers and the Marines had to go through in Fallujah, that often required knife fighting because you could not pull up an M16 rifle and shoot them at short range. You were fighting hand-to-hand. So how can a woman who is now declared equally defend herself if she has 20% less lung capacity and 45% less muscle mass? And when I would get these women who would come at me, and often in the Army, they would come at me hard, they would simply state, well, you're denying women opportunity. I said, no, I'm ensuring that women have a full career. Because if you put them in these egregious standards that are going to require them to have a higher capacity of mental exhaustion, which they have surely will. I had to work out twice as hard just to barely keep up. Let's be honest about this. You will burn out. How are you going to have a 20-year career when the Marine Corps study that showed that integrated units, meaning male and female units, were only performing at 60% of the capacity as the non-integrated? And the Secretary of the Navy tried to slap General Dunford and say, well, you didn't choose the most qualified women. First of all, that was an insult to the women that were out there because they had graduated boot camp and infantry training school by the Marine Corps in this experiment. These were the best women the Marine Corps had to offer. And I dare to say any female, even if she couldn't graduate infantry training school, but graduated Marine Corps recruit training, was the best our society has to offer. We're not going to get superhuman women like Serena Williams out there on the battlefield. They're going to go make real money. You have to work with what your society offers you. And now to establish this unrealistic standard that you're going to have these gender neutral standards. Would we have if we did that? Gender neutral standards. We would have teams collapse and the American public would be in dismay as a strong, as a wide safety slaughters a female who is going to be running towards the touchdown line. They would be appalled. So it's ludicrous on its face. If men and women are the same, then our Olympics would compete together, our NBA would be together, our NFL would be together. And to suggest that you can put women, now let me go also against the left on this. They always talk about violence against women. Well, we can't have violence against women. You can't be inappropriate with women. But yet you're going to put them in the most violent job on the planet. Okay, so we're not being realistic. This equal opportunity, the military has never been an equal opportunity organization. Can't join if you're too fat, too tall, too blind, missing limbs. You cannot join if you're not physically capable of performing those standards. So here, I am aghast that Secretary Austin is this tone deaf. After this huge outpour against Tucker Carlson attacking a civilian that was making a very valid point that our priorities are misplaced, instead of taking a step back, he went in harder.
Yeah. This is the remarkable point, and you're absolutely right. Instead of toning it back, realizing they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, they're actually doubling down. We're talking to Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Jane Duff. Follow her on Twitter at Jessie Jane Duff. My townhall.com colleague, author of the Kelly Turnbull series of books and the 21 Lies about Donald Trump and you, Colonel Kurt Schlichter. Follow him on Twitter at Kurt Schlichter. Kurt, we gotta stop complaining. I am fuming. I am utterly fuming at what I just was sent by my producer Jeff. Let's talk about how we fix it, or if it is fixable at all. The biggest problem now is we've got this commander in chief, we've got this Secretary of Defense. But it's bigger than that, isn't it? You know, as a graduate of the War College, you know from the last 10 days that this is about two factors that have to be changed. Number one, the cultural environment of the training and the education. If this is what our officers and senior enlisted are being taught, that's going to shape it. I've seen it. I've seen the 06s tell me that global warming is the primary threat to America. I've seen it with my own eyes when I ran an index for MOS strategists under the Obama administration. And the second thing is even more disturbing in the last 10 days is the politically permissive environment, whereby it's okay to do political actions, even to do information operations in uniform on your social media account as a military officer against your own population. When you are seeing, and let's play this audio now. This is how this is not news. Every bloody single day on every conservative channel blows my mind. This is the man who just ordered that queer, what the hell is queer and intersex will be integrated to drive, they will be promoting them in the decision making of the DOD. That man, Lloyd Austin, said this before he was confirmed in the Senate. Play cut.
The job of the Department of Defense is to keep America safe from our enemies. But we can't do that if some of those enemies lie within our own ranks.
Enemies. The man who was confirmed by Republicans as well is talking about enemies in uniform in our armed services. For me, and I know it's the same for you, Kurt, an enemy is somebody you shoot in the head or you drop a JDAM on. Talk to us about, is it possible to change any of this?
No, it's absolutely possible. You just need a leadership that's willing to do it. And we're basically going to have to go through what we had post-Vietnam, which is a complete return to standards. The post-Vietnam military was broken. It was the culture was completely destroyed. It was not warfighter focused. Soviet Union, if it were smart, would have taken advantage of it in the late 70s and probably walked all the way to Normandy from the other direction.
Right.
It took a lot of years, it took a lot of time, but it did happen and it did pay off. And what you had were visionaries there who saw standards, enforced them, went back to the traditions of 5,000 years of military service, found those eternal truths, and put them into effect. We're going to need that again, but they need a commander-in-chief who backs them, and that's important. I was a big supporter of the president, our former president, and but he had faults, and one of the faults is, like so many Americans, he was very, very impressed by military officers. You come in and they got their badges and they got their ribbons and they've done a lot of things. And in battle, many of these guys, look, the fine thing is, many of these guys, it's not like they're cowering in foxholes. These are guys who fought. These are guys who've gotten shot. It always stunned me, the guy who's fearless leading his soldiers in a tactical situation, he gets back to Washington, and he's as scared as an adjunct professor at Gumbo State when the folks at the gender studies seminar start saying that he's unleashing his male gaze. You've got to set a culture that doesn't tolerate that nonsense anymore, and it begins at the top, and it begins by firing a bunch of these senior guys. And I mean firing. I don't mean, okay, we're going to let you move, which one question I always ask is, who's the general who's gotten fired for losing in Afghanistan or Iraq? You could say Douglas McKiernan, but he didn't get fired. He was asked to leave a little early so Stanley McChrystal could come in and screw it all up.
My metric is another one, not which GO got fired, but which GO on principle resigned because he said to the commander-in-chief, to Obama, whoever, sorry, I can't turn Afghanistan into Switzerland. See ya, thank you, here's my commission.
That's never going to happen. But McMaster will write books about how it should happen. All right, this should put on the reading list right next to Kendi and D'Angela. No, it'll do it.
Jesse.
Yeah, I'm chomping at a bit because I do think that we're not helpless. Senator Cruz, I think if anybody hasn't read his letter to the Secretary of Defense, should read it because he lays the groundwork for those changes to happen.
Yeah, but hang on. Can I jump in here? Great letter. I read the whole letter on.
I'm not finished.
Sorry. Go ahead.
He set a groundwork. He threw down the gauntlet. Obviously, Secretary of Defense ignored it. 2022 is right around the corner. And guess what? Funding. When the military has lost conservative support, it's going to be in trouble because we have exhausted our taxpayers with massive funding to this military. In fact, Donald Trump reinvigorated, put a shot in the arm. But if you're going to make these your priorities and you're basically going to turn our military into a bunch of eunuchs who are incapable of having any drive to accomplish anything, the conservatives that get into Congress need to get over their veteran guilt and start going forward. And as far as people like Tammy Duckworth, who actually suggests that you can't talk about the military unless you served in the military, no, you answer to us, the American taxpayer. You don't answer to yourselves. You're not on some pillar of faith that we all go worship because that golden calf is not what the American people want to sustain. And she is wrong to say that. And Senator Cruz called that out in his letter. So I do say our Congress in 2022, they got 2 years that they're going to push. This is why Biden's working so fast. They're trying to muck things up as fast as they can because they know they only got 2 years. And it'll take 6 years to overturn it all. But that gauntlet was dropped by Senator Cruz, and I will say, if it gets ignored, they can stand by in 2022 because funding is going to be very difficult to fund, this playground that they're creating with our military.
All right, couple of reactions. You're both on fire. Here's Dr. G's truth bomb. I read the letter on the show yesterday. Great letter. I actually recorded the whole thing, and it's up on YouTube. But somebody pointed out to me afterwards, and it is a sterling letter. I think I know who wrote it for Ted. By the way, it's a letter. It means zip. Squanzoli, nada. The commandant of the Marine Corps is not going to, arrive in Cruz's office and say, yes, sir, no, sir, because you're a senator. Nothing's going to change. Nothing. The sentiments, spot on, absolutely right. But it doesn't make a difference. Secondly, you're right in principle on spending. You can grab the DOD by the nuts if you want to. But I don't see any conservative, with the exception of my old boss, Donald Trump, playing the military, you're eunuchs, you're not getting the money card. I just do not see any quote-unquote Republican having the balls to do that. And here's what I wanted to ask you guys, and you can respond to all of this whenever you want. Here's a snapshot of how bad it is. For those of you who aren't familiar, okay, this is the depth of how bad it is. And I'm sad, I am gutted, because I like to think I'm not biased, but my 2.5 years with the Marines in Quantico was very special for me. I started working for the DOD in 2004, and I left Quantico to go to the White House in 2016. So that's 12 years of experience. I love the Marines. But the most disturbing experience I've ever had with the U.S. military are with two Marines, and they're both generals. Number one, General Mattis, the quote-unquote Mad Dog, this amazing propagandized legend of the Mad Dog, the warrior monk with the library of 5,000 books that traveled with him. Mattis is a coward. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When President Trump decided to move our embassy to Jerusalem, only 3 people in his cabinet supported him. 3. I won't mention who they are, but you can probably guess. And none of the 3 were Mad Dog Mattis. When he finally convened his principles to say, it's happening, I'm doing it because I promised the Israelis, I promised the American people, and it's the right thing to do after 23 years of breaking every promise by every president. You know who said, don't do it the most vociferously? Mad Dog. The Secretary of Defense, this lion of the Marine Corps, said, Mr. President, don't do it. You will ignite World War III, and I don't have enough Marines to protect our embassies, which was utter yellow-bellied bullshit cowardice. That's Mad Dog, and he was sec-def. What's even worse than that, because he can be an idiot geopolitically, which is a bit disturbing for Secretary of Defense, but it's not the first one. The President's Chief of Staff. President Chief of Staff, 2 stories about John Kelly, likewise a Marine, with an amazing career. Lost his son in the G1. This is my story to tell, and I'll start with Corey Lewandowski's. And he's told this story, so it's okay. Corey had access to the president whenever he wanted it. He wasn't on the staff, but he's a former, strategist on the campaign, and he wanted to talk to the boss whenever he wanted to, and the boss wanted to talk to him. One day, after Kelly had tried incessantly to box out Corey and to make sure he couldn't come into the White House, he got in and he saw the president. Afterwards, Kelly saw him in the corridor in the West Wing and grabbed him by the lapel, ripping the button off his jacket, screaming at him, saying, who do you think you are coming in this building without my permission? And he called it my house. He called the White House his house. My experience with Kelly. Kelly used the clearance process, and I'm letting it all out here. Kelly used the clearance process to block MAGA political appointees. He would tell the security office, that guy, that gal doesn't get a clearance, just unilaterally, and then say, sorry, you can't come in because the CIA or the FBI says you can't get a clearance, which was a lie. He tried it with me. I fought back. I said, screw you, I'm going to appeal, and I got my TS reinstated. I saw him a few months ago, before the total COVID shutdown, at a charity event at Mount Vernon. And I walked up to that bastard, and I said, you failed. You failed to destroy us. And I've got my TS back. What did he say? He said, that snarky kind of Kelly smirk. You never should have had one. That's a Marine talking to a deputy assistant to the president politically commissioned officer. We have a real problem, guys. And it's right at the top of our geo class. I know you both have something to say. Let's start with Kurt.
No, you're absolutely right. And the problem is he could do it because the president was impressed by him, the president trusted him, and the president didn't see what he was doing. You need a president who goes in surrounded by woke veterans, and that's just for the military. You need them woke HHS people, woke agriculture people. He needs folks that are on his side, not Washington's side. Look, Trump's biggest problem was always personnel. Trump's problem coming in is he had no Rolodex because he wasn't a Bush.
Yeah.
He didn't have 100,000. He didn't have 5,000 guys he could call on who owed him favors. We're not going to fall for that again. We now have a generation of conservatives who did work at the White House and do know something, and we just need a president to go in knowing what the game is. If I were President Schlichter. Hey, Chief of Staff Kelly, why doesn't Dr. Gorka have his clearance? Well, you see, God darn it, I didn't ask you why. I asked you to get it done. 9 a.m. tomorrow, you either show me his clearance or you brief me on how you're going to have by 5 o'clock. If you don't have by 5 o'clock, I'm having your job. Get out! I'll tell you.
That's how it should be done.
By firmness.
I think
You got my vote, Jesse.
I think it's a little bigger than this, though. I think once, and I addressed this at a national security event that Dr. Gorka, we had both attended, and after the president left, this is before he got elected out at the Dulles airport, and after he had left, General Boykin and Tony Peters had a forum, and I stood up in front of the crowd and I said, okay, we're talking about all these great things the Pentagon's going to stand for. Well, who's going to do it? Because the generals that are in the Pentagon now didn't stand up against women fighting in ground combat. I said, not one of them other than General Dunford. So who's going to do all these changes? Because all of the men that were in leadership positions, and women, mind you, all went along. Because who signs their promotion? The commander-in-chief. And when anybody gets near that Pentagon, they become politicized. They no longer are in a command. They're no longer in a readiness position where their forward thinking is on unit readiness, because you could do what we call a react drill, where in 24 hours you have to deploy. We did those all the time. But when you're in the Pentagon, the paper-pushing palace, and you have these people who are more concerned about their next rank and appealing to the commander-in-chief in a way that may be against the good order and discipline or the national security. So these generals, Mattis, you're right, was legendary. When I was on active duty, he was legendary, but he became a defense contractor. He also was known for having close ties to, what was it, Amazon or Google? His Silicon Valley ties were immense. When your pockets start getting lined, the last two Secretary of Defense have been on that board with Raytheon. I can't stress this enough. They're no longer forward thinkers for the military. They're forward thinkers for their profit. They are now the swamp, such as Secretary Austin is. And Mattis and Kelly I was probably even more disappointed in, because he didn't have those ties to the defense industry, as I recall. He did not, but many, like Donald Trump Jr. said, these guys leave the Pentagon, and where do they go? They go piggyback off of a profit for war system. Yeah. And I'm guilty of it. I've worked for defense contractors, but you have to think, how can somebody who's profited off of war now be in the best interest? It's become a war machine, the industrial war complex, and our efforts should not be on how can we keep more war for more profit. I'm aghast that these generals coming out of the Pentagon are even considered heroic, because they're not. Yeah. They become politicians, and that's what Kelly and Mattis became, and they got too big for their own damn britches because they weren't humbled, and all that's right. Unfortunate.
We've got 60 seconds left. I've kept you long enough, guys. Let's go beyond the military, beyond the national security and the crazy wokeness. I'll ask you each the question I ask all of our guests. What is your message to those Americans who have either given up, said after November they've given up, or who have just been intimidated or are starting to feel intimidated by the cancel culture? Jesse first, and then we'll end with Kurt.
You cannot live in fear. Absolutely. If we all unite and speak out and continue to speak out, despite the hardships that we may face with speaking out, you will overcome. If you have faith, if you believe in God, you are not going to fall. You are not going to be buried under this, because we must continue to strive towards it. Continue to vote, continue to work, and help your local politics, because if you start at the bottom and move your way up, you will definitely have an impact in it all.
Last word, Colonel K.
Never give up, never quit. Let's understand, we're Americans. We're the best there are. We can't be beaten. And look at our opponents. I mean, look at Mattis. For all his, all the hype and everything, this is a guy who got suckered by that weird Theranos girl. These aren't superstars. They're not super achievers. Like I said, Tucker Carlson's lost fewer wars than they have. These guys, we can take them, and we will take them, and we will rebuild the American military. And for you folks still serving right now, hunker down, do your job, avoid the wokeness. Help is on the way.
Fabulous message. Follow both of these warriors, Kurt Schlichter, Jessie, Jane Duff. I'm Sebastian Gorka, and this has been a very special edition of America First. God bless.